Made it to pretty much one of the most important stops on the tour. I actually think it's the most important. This is the Jewish Holocaust Memorial, or it's officially known as the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe. That's the rather dramatic official title. So, like I said, most important stop on the tour, at least in my opinion, but also it's been a very, very controversial memorial. Controversial for quite a number of reasons, some of them going back before this place even existed. One of those reasons goes back to the early 1990s, when they began the planning and designing of this massive memorial. They opened that design process up to the public. So, private individuals, private design companies could put forward their own ideas to the German government of what they thought a good memorial would be. And yeah, some of those ideas that came back to the German government, yeah, rather controversial. Some of them just basically offensive. One idea somebody had was for a gigantic tank of blood. A 100 meter by 100 meter by 100 meter huge cube of blood. Now, what kind of blood they would have used? Yeah, okay, not discussed, because the idea was awful. Another great idea, though, was for the massive Ferris wheel, a bit like the London Eye. Now, this person's idea, though, wouldn't have you sitting in seats. This person's idea would have you sitting in the train cars that took the Jews further east to their deaths. Now, where they sourced these trains from, also not discussed, because the idea was rejected straight away. My favourite idea, though, was the idea for the gigantic oven, burning 24 hours a day here in the centre of Berlin. Historically, of course, that reference is very, very clear, a little too clear. I think if you're going to take part in a design process for a memorial this complex, you're going to need to show a little bit more subtlety. Now, the man they finally chose was a New York architect called Peter Eisenman. And Eisenman's original idea was actually also vetoed by the German government. What he really wanted to build was a massive maze, a huge labyrinth that would have wound its way through this area. Now, the idea behind that maze was that you would go in with your friends, your family, or maybe your bike gang, and you'd get lost. Separated from these people, you start to feel alone, scared, disorientated, confused, getting towards feelings you may have experienced in a camp of some kind in the late 30s and the mid 1940s. Now, the German government, they really appreciated this theoretical concept and its background, but they had to veto the idea because they themselves were too afraid that people would get into the memorial, into the maze, they'd get too lost, too scared, too disorientated, too confused, they'd try and climb out of the maze, they'd fall down, either hurt themselves or kill themselves, and the German government didn't want dead and dying people lying all over this Holocaust memorial. Yeah, that kind of dark irony, a little bit too dark, even for the Germans. Now, the man, like I said, they chose Eisenman, but they wanted a compromise from him, and this is the compromise they came up with. 2,711 concrete blocks. So the idea of disorientation and kind of claustrophobia is still there, because as you go further in, you can see the ground gets deeper and the blocks get higher. So especially when you're in the middle, you do find yourself surrounded by these massive kind of obelisk-like structures. But the compromise is, as you can see, any way you look, north, south, east, west, forwards, backwards, you can find your way to relative safety. Now, another reason for controversy, though, goes back to 2004. When they're putting the finishing touches for this memorial. One of those finishing touches involved an anti-graffiti chemical, a substance a bit like Teflon. So if graffiti is sprayed on here, it can be wiped away within a matter of seconds, basically. Now, the controversy comes when the media did some research, and they found out that the company who applied that chemical, the anti-graffiti substance, that company had a sister company back in the 1940s called Degussa, and Degussa had manufactured Zyklon B gas. Now, if you don't know what Zyklon B is, it's quite literally the gas, the product that killed millions of people in the chambers of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and Belzec and Dachau. It's the product that killed millions. So, when that fact came out into the public light, huge scandal, huge controversy, massive embarrassment for anyone involved in this memorial. But, there were calls to knock the whole thing down and start again, but by that stage, about 30 million euros had been spent on the site, about 14 million above ground and 16 million below ground. Over in that far corner, there is an underground documentation centre, an underground museum. It's free, it's open from Tuesdays till Sundays, 10:30 a.m. till 7:30 p.m. And it's quite small, but it really is very intense, it really packs a punch. So it's well worth checking out, but you won't really feel too good coming out of there. I think that's